Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Vronich of Statewide News Service, jbiztechphilly.com. As you can see here, columnist for the Jewish Press.
Well, yes, and I'm having a lot of fun doing all of that. I have a column called Albany Beat, which talks about how government relates to the Jewish community, or doesn't, as the case may be. But today we're going to talk about how government relates to the environment.
All right, there you go.
And with us, we have our guest, Willie Janeway, the Executive Director of the Adirondack Council.
Mark, Rabbi, nice to be here.
And we should talk about how Judaism relates to the environment.
Because we have a 6 million acre park.
We do.
And it's larger. You could fit, 5 other national parks within the state park. And
is it the biggest park in the United States?
It's the biggest state park.
6 million acre Adirondack Park is the largest park in the continental United States. The only place you can go to get anything bigger is to go to Alaska.
Yeah.
Where you just came from.
I was just there, and I like the Adirondacks better.
Okay.
Nice to be
Tell
back
us
home.
what the Adirondack Council is. What are you advocating, etc.?
The Adirondack Council is a nonprofit group that's doing advocacy work on behalf of the Adirondack Park, on behalf of the clean water, the wildlands there, really the ecological integrity, and make sure that this 100-plus-year-old park, and we can talk about the history of how it was created back in the 19th century. We are an advocate for the integrity of that park and perpetuating it, and we have a vision of a park with large protected wilderness areas, vibrant communities, working landscapes all interspersed like a quilt. And the park has been so successful over these 100-plus years that it now serves as a model around the world for how people and nature can come together and respect nature and also benefit from it.
Do you have an estimate of, because there's 10 or 15 counties within the Adirondack Park?
There's 2 counties that are fully inside
Right.
the Adirondack Park, Hamilton and Essex.
Okay.
Another handful more that are partially in the park and partially outside. About 130,000 residents.
Year-round.
Year-round residents in the park, about 10 million visitors.
Right.
Maybe 200,000 part-time residents, maybe summer residents, weekend residents.
But the full-time, year-round residents are how many again?
6 million acres and about 130,000 people. So a
That's
very
it.
small year-round resident population.
Well, I know Hamilton County, most of the population in the southern part.
Yes.
And the northern part is for the camping and snowmobiling and winter sports and, the part-time stuff, the visitors, the tourism.
And one of the fascinating transitions for the Adirondacks is when it was first created, there was a lot of controversy.
Well, why don't you tell us about the history then? Start from the history you were saying.
Yeah, we like controversy.
So we'll start
Yeah.
we can start back at the beginning.
Yeah, start from the
Back in
beginning.
the mid-19th century, people were trying to escape the cities of New York and Philadelphia, especially in the summer. And they found that the Adirondacks was just an incredibly beautiful place to go to get away, clean water, clean air.
And a little cooler also, probably.
Definitely cooler. Industry also discovered it because of incredible natural resources, the timber, the water, and the ore. And so there was this convergence of different uses in the mid-19th century. People started going up, visiting the Adirondacks, but at the same time, large-scale forest harvesting, clear-cutting was happening.
They say in the State Museum in Albany, they show
Yes, they show
they
that.
depict them. It's very good
On
depiction.
all the trees cut off, whole sections of what are now the Adirondacks, flooding downstream, the Erie Canal having issues later in the century, not enough water. So in 1885, the elected leaders in New York said, wow, there's a lot of pressure, we have to do something to protect the Adirondacks. Let's try and have the state land up there be protected as forever wild, as state land. That was a law, and at that time it didn't work very well. The state land kept getting clear cut even though it wasn't supposed to. Then the state created a park in 1892. Let's have this be a park, maybe that will protect it. But again, it was really still managed by a lot of backroom deals. We're here in Albany. We know how things can work, and the people got really frustrated. The people that were realizing how beautiful the Adirondacks was, and the economic interests that realized they needed the water from the Hudson River, the source of the Hudson. Comes right down by us here in Albany, starts up in the Adirondacks.
North Creek.
North Creek, the Erie Canal depended on the water from the Adirondacks. So a strange bedfellows arrangement of...
A confluence, you might say.
Confluence, yes, that's good, Mark, of economic interests and what we would now call conservation interests came together and said, let's protect the Adirondacks like no other place in the world is protected, and let's write it into New York State's Constitution. So in 1895, the 1894 Constitutional Convention was confirmed what is now called Article 14, which says the state lands within these counties, within this blue line of this Adirondack Park, are forever wild. The timber thereon shall never be cut, removed, or destroyed. The lands can't be leased. It's for everybody, the public land. So there's a park, which includes public and private, and then the state land for more than 120 years now is constitutionally protected as forever wild.
What was the population back then when it was made of the Adirondack? It's 130,000 now, but what was the year-round population back in the 1894?
I don't know what it was in the 1890s. I know that as we got into the 1960s and 1970s, the population was starting to grow in some places and shift in other places as we got away from some of the resource industries and got more tourism-based. But it's been fairly consistent across the park, down in some places, up in other places as a population. The big growth has been in second homes and in tourism.
Because it's really amazing how such a small constituency really got this constitutional amendment, you know.
Plus, maybe the New
passed.
York City people also wanted to see it.
But in the 1890s, it wasn't like you didn't have the Northway, you didn't have a lot of roads to get you up there. And certainly plane travel wasn't as what it is today.
Well, the Marshall family was a very famous family in New York City back at the turn of the century. And they were involved in helping to write that Article 14 to really codify that protection. Okay. And there was huge support. So I don't think it was so much a small group. It was approved by the voters and the people in New York as they said, wow, this is our Adirondacks. Right. And nowadays we talk to people and they say, oh, the Adirondacks. And we talk to voters all across New York.
But you just...
That's a national treasure. That's ours.
Yes, but you know, it's just amazing how the communications was not the way it is today.
Correct.
And how to get the promotional stuff out to get people to accept this at the Constitutional Convention.
Yes.
I mean, you just got to, you know, imagine how difficult it was for this thing to happen and what a miracle it is, basically.
And how much has it evolved as new challenges have come along and the conservation department?
As you're saying that, that's all fast forward to today. Yes. I mean, it seems like the Adirondacks is fairly strong, and even I think Governor Cuomo added another few thousand acres, if I remember. You know, so I think it's very strong. I mean, what are the issues today that you want to see to rectify or to strengthen the Adirondacks? Seems like they're, you know, you're right, it's preserved. Everything is good.
Well, it's a balance, and one of the challenges is to make sure we get that balance right. Right now, a little bit more than half of the 6 million acres is actually still private land, and it's managed. It's privately managed, but it also has oversight from an Adirondack Park agency, like a statewide zoning, to make sure the development is inconsistent with the character, and most of the development is focused in the
Someone makes in the
hamlets.
backyard or a second home on it, I mean.
So you're allowed to do some of that with some restrictions, not unlike you would be in Guilderland or Del Mar.
Having a zoning board or a planning board.
But here it's a statewide because of the statewide interest. But getting the balance right, Rabbi, of making sure that the private land is developed responsibly, sustainably, environmentally to protect the clean water and wildlife, and the state land, the governor has just completed the largest new acquisition in more than 100 years.
Really?
That new state land, it's priceless. It includes some of the headwaters of the Hudson River, Boreas Ponds, beautiful properties.
It was part of the Adirondacks, or now it's state instead of private?
It's now under state ownership, more than 60,000 acres that the governor has purchased. And getting the balance right on that will be very important as the governor decides, should this be some of the state land that's set aside as wilderness, so there's no motorized recreation but there's public access? Or should it be some of the state land that is set aside that is open for snowmobiling and mountain biking and motorized recreational uses? So there's some of each. The park is big enough, there's room, but getting that balance right is, you ask what are the challenges for us? Because we're coming off some very good successes of investment in the park. The challenge is really getting that investment right, protecting the clean water, keeping out the invasive species, adding some wilderness so we have a bigger High Peaks wilderness, and making sure the communities continue to survive too. Because it's those different pieces of the park together that make it combined so special globally.
So how, of the 6 million acres, how many acres is like Forever Wild and, you know, I mean, you must have these little factoids.
About 45% of the park is now state Forever Wild. And of that, a little more than 40% of that is wilderness. So with this new state acquisition, the governor has an opportunity to add some land to that wilderness. And
Right.
You say forever wild, mean you can't build a house? What would be the ramifications? That if I wanted to buy a little land and,
Well, you can't buy Forever Wild land, it's under state ownership.
Correct.
you know,
But there's private land that's on the market that's transferred that people buy and
Right.
sell and build homes on. And most of that development occurs in the hamlets, small businesses to protect the backcountry. And that's the reason people like to buy property up there.
Oh,
So
some
that
of,
they can have backcountry.
some of the homes in Garnet Hill are
Yes.
just, I mean, they have landing pads. The people come in
Really?
with their helicopters and they land on, they have a landing pad.
You don't see too many of those.
But you know, I'm telling you where it is, so
Yes.
if you wanted to see it, you
I'd
can
like to,
go,
yes.
You know, but
We'll have to get you up there, Rabbi.
there you go, I'll take that trip with
Well, we
you.
have another rabbi in the Albany area who goes there, goes up to 13th Lake
Yes.
in the winter, and he stays a month. He rents a house,
Oh,
rents
nice.
someone's house, and he stays a month. And I went up one year, and the 13th Lake was frozen over. So you go with the rabbi, you say you walked on water, you know. It's like,
Wrong religion.
Can I go
over
with
there.
you on that? It's mixed with the other different religions.
so we have this, but we have a fun time, you know.
And I
even in the
also
winter.
think we find that there's a common thread of people who love the Adirondacks that transcends any particular religion.
Oh,
And it's an honoring of this incredible, and I used the wrong terminology, a cathedral,
Mm-hmm.
a synagogue of this natural resource that has come to us and that we are the stewards of for the future.
You have, there are two synagogues that I know of in the Adirondacks, Saranac Lake and Lake Placid.
I know Lake Placid has one, yes.
Right, the Lake Placid one, I think is the one, well, maybe it's Saranac. One of them's on the Historic National,
Okay.
you know, and I think it might have been Saranac Lake at the bottom of Route 3, where Route 3 comes down and it's a T and there's the lake and the synagogue is right on the lake.
And there was a time in the Adirondacks when you go back to its earliest years, the beginning of the 20th century, you know, all was not great in terms of respect for different religions, and there were sections that were very much one way, and then other sections,
Right.
there were clubs that were not letting in certain
Really?
people.
But it was,
And there was real haves and have-nots, and so there was incredible diversity in the Adirondacks, but very segregated inappropriately, I would say.
I think
And
we-
that's it's been encouraging to see that change over time and come together, which I think is good for the park and good for society.
I think mainly between the 20s and 60s of the 20th century, I think
Yes.
there was a time when there were a lot of Jews in the Adirondacks owning businesses like lumber. And people don't realize we're like the second or third in lumber production in the country. I don't know if you knew that, but
Where they coming from, not the Adirondacks?
yeah, they
Really? You can
Lewis
still-
County mainly. A lot
There's
of Lewis
still,
County.
of the 6 million
And then-
acres, so a little more than 45% is state land, so you've still got more than 3 million acres of private land.
Right, but this
Close
is
to 2
now.
million of that is private forest land.
And when
Really?
when you go back to between the 1920s and 60s, it was even less of a percentage.
Yes.
And so you could really see that, you know, they really had a lot of forestry and a lot of tearing down a lot of trees and lumber and all that. But anyway, they you know, whether it was the leather stocking and the leather industry, was a lot of the owners of those businesses were Jewish, and you know, that's how they were able to maintain the two synagogues up there. So I think the Lake Placid one is the one that's open year-round, and they
Okay.
say they're the only year-round synagogue in the Adirondacks. They promote themselves that way. And then the Saranac Lake one has the uniqueness of being on the State Historic Site, you know, or
And
National
the
Historic
Adirondack
Site.
Council, because we believe in the multi-generational preservation of the Adirondacks, we want to expand and diversify the constituency of people who love and will stand
Yeah.
up for the Adirondacks.
Right.
It's a political creation, as you know, Mark. So if there's not political support, so we've worked with a lot of stakeholders in the park to make sure that the park is welcoming and inclusive to people from all backgrounds, regardless of religion or economic status. It helps share this incredible global resource with more people, but it's also smart for the small communities and businesses in the park to market themselves to more than one slice of society, but to market themselves to a broader slice.
So what's the cell phone controversy? Where are we at with that? with the cell
That's a
phone.
great example of how things have changed. So 40-some years ago in the Adirondacks, lots of debate and controversy, the tension between economic development and preserving the wild character. And that was amplified when the demand came for cell phones to work in remote places like the Adirondacks. So cell companies wanted to build big, tall towers that were going to look like Frankenpines.
Frankenpines, yes, I love that word.
A
yeah.
lot of people, locals and visitors, were concerned about that would scar the landscape. But we wanted to have cell service. And so in Albany, we would call it a compromise, was worked out where cell towers would get built. They wouldn't be as tall, so they're not as obvious. And we'd build a few more towers than you might otherwise build, but you'd build them shorter, and as a result, we now have good cell service in a lot of the Adirondacks. I can now drive from Albany all the way up to exit 30, Keene, where you get off to go to Lake Placid, and I can be on my cell phone, hands-free, the entire way, all the way up to there, and not lose my signal. 10 years ago, you could not do that. And on that drive, I cannot see where the cell towers are because they're well screened and protected.
And
So
the
that,
Like
that's
Frankenpines, you know.
so they're not Frankenpines.
Oh, really?
The Adirondack Council fought against big, huge towers that would stick above
Well,
the
even
tree
small
line.
towers to be green, to have the greenery around the
You can do-
cell.
you can
I
screen
mean,
them
you didn't
in with-
even want to. You didn't even want that.
No, we want the small towers.
Right, but you didn't want them with looking like small Frankenpines.
Yes, you need
That's
to
what
be
I meant.
blended in properly
yeah.
with a building or with another
Uh-huh.
tree.
Yeah.
And that has been successful
Now, when you go from Keene, which is at the Keene exit in Essex County,
yes.
to the Clinton County line,
Yes.
you have a bit of a problem with cell service.
There are a few spots
Yeah,
there,
yeah, yeah.
and
I'm
I've
just
found
saying,
that in
I'm-
Maine
I'm
and
just-
in New Hampshire and Vermont and in the Finger Lakes, there
I'm
there
not
are
being
dead
picky.
spots in
I'm
a lot of
just,
spots.
just mentioning, that's all. And, you know, a lot of this cell tower controversy was because there was this rabbi and his wife who got killed
On the Northway,
on the
yes.
Northway, and they didn't have cell service to call for help, you know, and they were alive and they just died in their car, you know.
Well, Senator Betty Little represents the North Country, and
Yes.
she's a frequent visitor down here to the Albany area, and I was just talking with her as session came to end and explaining to the senator that I can now use my phone all the way up.
Yeah.
So that big blue sign you see just after you come in the Adirondack Park that says, "Warning, no cell service for the next many, many miles." So we should go take an axe to it and cut it down and restore the scenic vista. There won't be a big blue sign there anymore, and your cell phone will work. And I hope that she's able to do that.
So this is a relatively recent phenomena, this cell.
Over the last few years, yes.
But they still haven't taken down the sign, even though it's been a few years?
No. The
Well, they don't
DOT's
have
usually
money to
better
take
at putting up signs and taking them
Oh,
down.
I see.
so.
Well, maybe someone will crash into it and bend it down and...
I think, well, I foresee a celebration. This is the kind of
Well, it
event
should.
the governor likes.
Yeah.
That we have come together, we're using technology, we're helping communities, and we're advancing an environmental agenda.
Yes.
He's done that repeatedly, and in the Adirondacks, he has an opportunity to do that here.
Did you ever take advantage or show up at the Adirondack Challenge?
Yes.
That he did? Did you actually
Yes,
participate?
no, they've invited me to be on the challenge. They even put me in a raft paddling with some of my friends in local government and racing the governor. I couldn't manage to win. Seems like every year the governor always wins. I'm not sure what I have to do to be a winner in the challenge.
Maybe be a governor over there.
No, that's okay. I'm not going there. But it's fun. It's a great example
You
of
win, he
how
cuts
the,
your funding.
the governor has put a spotlight on the Catskills. He's doing it on the Finger Lakes. He's doing it in the Catskills. Excuse
Yes.
me, done it in the Adirondacks, doing it in the Catskills. Bringing up downstate legislators, making everyone realize this is a really special, fun place.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
Right.
It's better doing business together when we're back in Albany if we've been out rafting on a river together in the Hudson Gorge. And the Hudson Gorge is world-class whitewater
Yes.
here in New York.
Really?
Yep. And now, can you talk about this Adirondack Almanac?
Yes, the Adirondack
It's
is,
an online news journal?
it
or
is,
something like that?
and it's closely associated with the Adirondack Explorer, which is a
Uh-huh.
bi-monthly magazine that gets put out.
So every other
so
month,
they're
not every
linked
2
together.
weeks. Not every 2 weeks, every other month.
Every other month,
Okay.
correct. And so they are journalism with an opinion, as they say.
Yes.
They don't try to hide that they do have a bias, and they think the Adirondacks are special.
But it's nothing that the Adirondack Council has anything to do with, right?
No, we encourage it, we support it.
Okay.
Because we think it's a great educational tool, and we want more people to understand, to be educated about the Adirondacks. And we welcome the debate that goes on in those pages about the different ways of managing the state lands and the different ways of protecting the park. It's a healthy debate. It involves the citizens of the state in their park's future.
How do you get their funding? I mean, what's your funding from private or it's government?
As an advocate,
I mean,
The
I mean,
Adirondack
your
organization,
council, right?
the
Adirondack
Adirondack
Council,
Council
yeah.
does not accept any government money, so we only take private
Can't cut your
contributions,
funding.
individuals, foundations. And so when the governor is doing something great, we can cheer him and say thank you. And when the governor's proposing something we don't like, we can make a lot of noise about it.
Wag the
They
finger.
have no leverage. We can be an honest broker on behalf of the future
So
of
where
the
does your money come
Adirondacks.
from?
From thousands of individual donors, from foundations, but no, we don't have corporate sponsors.
No.
It's the people who love and care about the Adirondacks.
And what's your budget?
It's about $1.7 million a year, and it's 100%
Wow.
raised. There's a piece of it which is interest from a reserve fund we have. It's a legal reserve fund. We treat it as an endowment, but if there's a big challenge, we can also use that for
Sure.
a big campaign to protect the Adirondacks.
What about the black fly? Everybody talks
Oh,
about that.
Black fly season? and-
Yeah.
The what?
No, you never heard of it?
Yeah, okay.
Never heard of it,
Yeah,
all right.
okay.
Well, go.
The governor was up announcing his most recent acquisition in May, and there were a couple black flies that started buzzing around. He tried to ignore them. And during the early spring, there can be a few in some
Like
places.
for 1 month, it's something like
It's
that.
pretty short, and during breezy times, that's not, if there's no wind, you get out on a lake where there's a breeze, and then you stay away from the black flies. They're very avoidable, they're not that bad. And by the 4th of July weekend, we should be past the worst of the black flies.
That's what I was told. If I want to go camping up in the Adirondacks, wait till after July 4th.
I have had great experiences already this year, and I did not have a lot of problems with black flies.
Now, is that because of the warm winter that we had?
That does
Or-
impact
no?
it. In the spring, if you get a cold night, that really knocks back the black flies for a while. But what's really interesting is you talk to someone about the Adirondacks and they ask the black fly question. And then they come up and they said, what were people talking about? It's rarely that significant an issue. And there was concerns back in the 1800s when people promoted the Adirondacks. And they had pictures of people hiking and enjoying the Adirondacks. Adirondack Murray was his name, and he promoted the Adirondacks. Some people came up and were not happy that he didn't tell them about the black flies.
Oh,
Yes, they're there, but they're very manageable. A little bug dope, proper clothing, get in a spot with a breeze, you can have a great
and what
time.
are some of the other precautions people should take when they're hiking in the Adirondacks?
They should go online and find out about where they're going and make sure they have some of the basic things with them. Some food, some water, some rain gear, a map and a compass, a flashlight, in case you end up getting stuck out a little longer than you might otherwise. And ideally, don't hike alone.
And-
Go with some other people that are experienced and have been there before.
And long pants and long shirts so that you don't get bitten
That
or
really
no?
depends on the weather.
Okay.
And dress to be comfortable. Bring some extra layers in case it gets cold. Bring a raincoat.
I know one of the, I hiked Algonquin
Yes.
Mountain, the second tallest mountain.
Yeah.
And by the time I got to the top, the weather was very different from when I started off at the bottom.
Yes, you can be in shorts and a t-shirt on the bottom of Algonquin and wear a winter coat and a hat when you get up on the top. But there are outfitters in many of the small communities, places like the Mountaineer in Keene Valley, places like High Peak Cyclery and Lake Placid. You can stop in there, get guidebooks, get instructions, directions,
Yeah.
where to go. There's a lot of good hikes. There's close to 46 peaks that are at or above 4,000 feet or were once thought to be that high. A lot of people like to climb those. Those are also the more crowded peaks.
Really?
So if you ask about what are some of the mountains that are a little below 4,000 feet or at 2,000, those have wonderful views, don't have the crowds. They're a lot easier, especially if you have a young family. So, there's thousands of miles of trail in the Adirondacks. There are thousands of lakes and ponds and streams, 100+ communities. There's an incredible variety of things, all seasons you can
And
do.
bring a slicker in
Bring
case
a-
it
bring a
rains.
slicker
because
in
could
case it rains.
It could rain up at the top of the mountain, but not be raining at the bottom of the mountain.
is so true.
Because of the clouds and the way So,
But I'm glad you went up Algonquin. That's a great success story from conservation. That you can go up there now, and I was up on a peak near Algonquin, Skylight, with my son, and we were looking at a view that I know was the same view that my great-grandfather looked at when he looked at from that mountain. And I'm talking to my son Charlie and saying, Charlie, you know, if you and the next generation does the job of protecting the Adirondacks, your great-great-grandchildren will be able to stand here and look out and see those lakes, know that there's moose and wildlife out there, and know that that is as wild as it was 100 years ago.
What is your history once you talk about it? You say your great-grandfather, you lived in the Adirondacks, you come from there?
We had a camp and still have a small family camp in the Keene area in the Adirondacks that's been in our family for 6 generations now.
Wow, that's a lot.
So I was very fortunate, as many other people have been, to be brought to the Adirondacks as a child and to see it and fall in love with it, which is why I love living and working in the Adirondacks now.
So brought from where? You were
In the
brought-
Hudson Valley of New York.
Which town?
The Westchester area, Mount Kisco,
Oh,
Medford,
really?
yes.
No, that's the way the governor lives now.
Yes.
So you can have you can certainly have a lot.
It's a very different Westchester today than it was back then.
You're not that old, but you're living up in
We
the
live- my
Adirondack.
family and I live in Keene, yes.
You live in Keene now, okay, and you've been living there for
Been for three
adult-
years now. In the
Okay.
Adirondack Council, we have a headquarters office in the Adirondack Park in the
Yeah.
town of Elizabethtown,
Right.
which is the Essex County seat. And we also have an office down here in Albany where John Sheehan, our communications director, and our Albany staff work. And they work down here working with you and other
Right.
members of the press and the media, and also with the government and legislative leaders.
So let me. So I got to tell the audience this because
Yes.
it really shocks me because there's not just this one municipality. Saranac Lake is actually cut between 2 counties,
It is, yes.
Essex and Hamilton.
Franklin and Clinton.
Franklin and Essex. Because
Frank-
if you live
Franklin,
on one
okay,
side of the
yes.
street, you have to go 30 miles to Elizabethtown to get your social services.
Yes,
And if you
okay.
live on the other side of the street, you're
Yes.
right there.
There's Clinton up above, and then there's Essex, and then there's Franklin County,
Right.
yes.
So then you go get your social services right there at Saranac Lake if you're in the Franklin County side. So,
And at the Adirondack
you
Council,
know, I mean, and
we
just-
get to work on, immediate issues like scoffing invasive species, helping some land get acquired, how that's going to, but there's also issues that are big and long-term. In this era, are there ways to better manage and run the park? Are there opportunities to save tax dollars with municipal consolidation and retaining the local control? Are there ways to redraw? New York State has different regions for its Department of Transportation
Yes.
than it has for its Department of Environmental Conservation,
Right.
than its Department of Health. So the Adirondack Park gets sliced and diced by each agency in different ways. And one of the things to look at from a long-term perspective when we're talking about government is you could manage the park a lot more efficiently and a lot better if you looked at better organizing how those different
I'm going to
government
bring
agencies.
that up the next time the governor talks about consolidation of municipalities, how he can consolidate his agencies to
Yeah.
treat the Adirondack Park as well. I'm going to bring that up. But Saranac Lake, it's amazing how that small town or village is
It's at the county line.
split through the county line. And it's just amazing how you have to, and it's not the only one. Betty Little told me about 2 or 3 others that are like that.
Right.
But you got to go 30 miles for your social services and stuff to Elizabethtown if you live on one side of the street, and you're right there in Franklin County where Saranac Lake has this for the social services.
And
I just couldn't believe it.
Lake
but-
Placid is well-known internationally.
Yes.
And one of the things a lot of us are trying to do is make sure people appreciate the rest of the Adirondacks.
Well, the Tri-Lakes area.
And the Tri-Lakes area is benefiting from a business sort of spillover from Lake Placid, but there's also central Adirondack towns like Newcomb, Minerva.
Yes.
Newcomb
Newcomb is famous. Newcomb is famous for an earthquake in the 1980s, like in '84. It was the center of a really major earthquake. I don't know if you knew that.
And it's where Teddy Roosevelt was when McKinley was shot.
That's what I was
And
gonna
then he
ask
jumped down to get on a train to go to Buffalo to become president.
Right.
He was up recreating in the Adirondacks
in
in
Newcomb.
Tahawas, in the Newcomb Tahawas area, that town.
And then they had to they took the train up to North Creek, but they had to take horseback up to Newcomb to get him.
Yes.
And then they had to come back on horseback, and they put him on the train to come into civilization, so that he could
So
be
there's
sworn
some
into
really
office.
neat history in the
Yeah.
Adirondacks, and
Yeah.
we love to help people understand and tell histories of camps, histories of people making livings in the park, making a living in the park in different ways. And we want to make sure that the tourism that goes to Lake Placid also spills over and doesn't just go to the Tri-Lakes area, but gets down to the Long Lakes, the Minervas, the North Hudson, these other
Loon Lake.
smaller towns. There's 130 towns, and some of them are really struggling. And the
Yes,
governor's doing a good
130
job
towns.
of celebrating and protecting the whole park, and also making sure there's money to help the communities. And you have to come up.
All right, Mark, that's an invitation.
Another,
We'll go over here.
you know, been there, done that, but I'm always happy to be back.
Hike, you
I
can
love it.
paddle, you can take a scenic flight over some of these incredible mountains.
Well, you'll have to help us with
Yeah,
that.
there you go.
We'd be glad to.
All right, well, we're out of time, but it was very enjoyable, and Mark and I are going to have to visit the Adirondacks and take some of the good air and environment in, and we want to thank you very much, and keep on going with incredible work and
Yes.
preserving and growing the
I
Adirondacks.
always knew having
Rabbi,
you on the
thank
show
you.
would be a great guest. And
Oh,
thank you. You
thank you
didn't
very much.
disappoint.
That was
so
fun,
thank
that was
you.
fun.